Well, let's get started. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Okay.
So there were some technical glitches this evening, and it's a bit unfortunate as we're starting the late period, and there's a reason why I entitled the program "The Struggle in Silence," Part 1, because this is where the part in Beethoven's life where his deafness becomes more and more profound, and he has some other personal struggles too. That affect his life pretty significantly. So what I thought I'd do tonight is read you my intro to the first piece, which was the slow movement of the Hammerklavier, and then play you the slow movement of the Hammerklavier, because that really, it's a significant work. It's 14 minutes, but you really should hear this performance by Jeremy Denk of the slow movement. But just let me give you my intro into the piece, and we'll start it that way. In 1814, Beethoven performed the Archduke Trio when it was a disaster. Composer Louis Spohr was in attendance and noted, quote, "The piano was badly out of tune, which Beethoven minded little, since he did not hear it. There was scarcely anything left of the virtuosity of the artist. I was deeply saddened." It was the last time Beethoven would perform on piano publicly. Beethoven had relied on a collection of ear trumpets to aid his hearing, but by 1818, he had to utilize conversation notebooks to communicate. The composer was now almost entirely deaf, but these books became an invaluable window into Beethoven's thoughts on music, business, and his personal life for the remainder of his life. In 1815, his brother Caspar died of tuberculosis, and Beethoven decided to challenge Caspar's widow for custody of their son Karl, saying that she was an unfit mother. The battle lasted several years and consumed so much time and energy that Beethoven wrote only a handful of compositions over the next 4 years. One of the most important works from this time was an epic piano sonata featuring a thorny fugue in the last movement. That's one of the most technically challenging pieces in the literature. The longest and most beautiful slow movements Beethoven would ever write precedes it. And then we go into the slow movement. So Beethoven was really, his hearing was gone, and he could only communicate by writing notes back and forth to his companions that he was with. And he got into this fierce legal battle for the custody of his nephew Karl. And he did this because he always believed in a strong sense of morality, and he felt that if you were not a moral being, you cannot succeed in the world. And he viewed his brother's widow as someone having loose morals, and said that she was very flirtatious. She had been 5 months pregnant when she married his brother. But by all accounts, it was all through Beethoven's just sheer determination that this woman was not good for his nephew, and that he was going to take it upon himself to wrest this child from her, and eventually was successful in doing so. It was really something, and over the course of this time, it was all consuming for him, in addition to his ongoing stomach ailments. And the only other major works that he wrote during this period were the An die ferne Geliebte, which we heard last week. He started sketches up for the Ninth Symphony, and then he wrote the 2 Hammerklavier sonatas. The Hammerklavier that everybody knows is Opus 106. Does anybody know the other one? Opus 101. And the Hammerklavier merely means that it's not a harpsichord, it's a forte piano. So he's specifying that these are not intended to play on a harpsichord. And for some reason, over the course of time, Hammerklavier became only associated with the 106, the Opus 106 sonata. And we're going to listen to the slow movement of the Opus 106 sonata. But I also wanted to read a short passage from Swafford about Beethoven's deafness. Did his deafness change his music? Of course it did. But how did it? How much of the late style had to do with his hearing is not easy to discern. There are miscalculations, particularly in late orchestration, but they are far outweighed by fresh and remarkable effects of spacing and color in orchestra and piano and string quartet. Continuity is another matter. Czerny reported secondhand that Beethoven told a friend his deafness, quote, prevented him from adhering. in his later works to the consistent flow and unity of his earlier ones, for he had been accustomed to composing everything at the piano. None of that is entirely accurate. Much of the late music has an unbroken flow and long sustained arcs. Maybe here Czerny's own skepticism about the late period is speaking. Still, in one way and another, Beethoven had to adapt his composing to his disability, mostly in ways he would not know. So it's hard to pinpoint how the deafness affected his composition, but it's obviously had an impact on the way he approached writing his music. So without further ado, so the Hammerklavier Sonata is very famous. It's an enormous sonata. The second movement, the slow movement, third movement, sorry, that we're hearing tonight, is the longest slow movement of his piano sonatas. The last movement is a very famous fugue that is so thorny that it challenges even the greatest pianist technically. It's one of the most difficult technical pieces in the whole piano repertoire. And we'll do it, I'll push it, I was gonna play it tonight, the fugue, but I'll push it back. We have a show focusing on fugues in 2 weeks, and I'll do it on Zoom then. But let's listen to the slow movement of the Hammerklavier Sonata, and this is Jeremy Denk, and it is from 2007. Okay, here we go. So that's what you missed. What'd you think of that?
That's a great piece of
Not
music.
his most joyous piece.
Joyous?
Yeah.
No.
Bob, what'd you say?
I said I liked it very much.
Yeah.
The beauty of the sound that he produces on the piano and the clarity brings out all that sadness. I also felt this time, you know, having heard it so many times before, but hearing this time that sense of the struggle between the kind of restraint that's imposed by the almost pedal point kind of passages in the left hand, and the struggle to be liberated from that in some of the more rhapsodic indulgences in the right hand. And finally, it's just resolved with this sadness and melancholy and beauty, and it sets you up for the kind of the fury and the anger of what's coming.
You know, there's about 2 minutes before the end, there's sort of this very brief manic, it's almost a manic moment where Jeremy really did this flourish, all, you know, to a forte, and then it was just all of a sudden again, piano. It was so wonderful. So wonderful. I mean, it's epic. It's an epic expression of exactly what David had spoken to about struggle and beauty and resignation almost. You know, it's such a remarkable piece. And you know, in musical circles, this movement's often overshadowed by the fugue. You know, people when they refer to this piece, it's often about the fugue solely.
Well, it's very much in the spirit of the three sonatas that follow it.
Yes,
Yeah. And
absolutely.
admit that yes, I had never paid much attention to this music before. It was like, no. So thank you.
No, that this is, you know, the quietude of the late period and the introspection that Beethoven brings about to his listeners is, it's each piece that's just the profundity is, it's almost overwhelming, you know, what he's expressing. It's quite remarkable.
You could hear the agony, absolute agony, especially with the use of syncopation throughout, just not knowing where he was going with it. But that was a tremendous piece.
But I also think the episodes of Quiet Strength where he has that motive, dee dee da dee, and it comes back twice, very very solemnly, and with a serenity that's just transformative. Yeah.
You know, Derek, there are really 3 or 4 different movements in that movement.
Yeah.
And any one of which in a previous sonata written by Beethoven or anybody else would have stood alone by itself and been a wonderful piece of music.
Yeah.
But putting them all together, just was a structure, is almost incomprehensible how he did that. And it follows through. The line is so beautiful all the way through.
It's just absolutely this continuity, this constant sort of, I don't want to say push, but this just sort of line that goes straight through everything all the way to the end. And that's what Swaffer was speaking about, these long arcs in the late period while when he can no longer hear. It's stunning. And then there's the Scottish songs, which we jumped in the middle of in this piece, which is quite a different thing. I wanted to read I did a brief introduction to this, and then I'll read some from who wrote that? That was that's a Beethoven quote. But back in 1806, Beethoven was contacted by the Scotsman George Thomson, who was seeking to have Scottish, English, and Welsh folk songs arranged by leading composers. Knowing that Haydn had done the same, the entrepreneurial Beethoven wrote Thomson, quote, "Mr. Haydn was given a British pound for each air." Over the course of the next 14 years, Beethoven wrote 125 such arrangements, but only included a set of 25 Scottish songs in his published catalog. So these were 2 songs from his Opus 108, the Scottish songs, the 25 Scottish songs. Quite different. But they weren't just money makers for Beethoven. He actually spent some time working on them and was a little persnickety here. So it goes that Thomson, the Scotsman Thomson, was kind of a pain and was always prodding Beethoven for alterations, always saying that the parts were too complex for the local musicians. And Beethoven wrote him back, "I am not accustomed to retouching my compositions. I have never done so, certain of the truth that any partial change alters the character of the composition. I am sorry that you are the loser, but you cannot blame me, since it was up to you to make me better acquainted with the taste of your country and the little facility of your performers.
Right around.
So he gave it right back to him. You know, it's a, you know, in typical, as you're getting to know, Beethoven's got a sharp wit to him. You know, but they're charming. They're almost these little ditties, but they have the craft of Beethoven behind them. You know, they're quite charming. I've done a couple performances, not at this series, of these songs, and they're lovely. And the performers, I mean, the mezzo who would come in, these are musicians from the Marlborough Festival, was Tammy Mumford, who's singing at the Met all the time, mezzo soprano. Yikes, I wrote it down here and I don't have the rest. It's Yeva Yokubavachute, was the pianist who we've heard in the trio Cavatina. The cellist was Marcy Rosen, the former cellist of the Mendelssohn Quartet. And the violinist is a young, very young, talented, used to be young, not so, Lily Francis, who now lives in Austria and is playing in Europe. But Tammy Mumford is a major mezzo soprano, and just a wonderful, wonderful singer. So really,
Derek, if Beethoven wrote 125 of these and only 25 got published, what happened to the other 100?
they're woos. They're without opus.
Oh, they're woos. Okay.
Yeah, they have woo. Do we know the woo people? So Beethoven's works that aren't published are capital W, small O, big O, without opus. And they are numbered. There's sets that are numbered throughout his life. We actually heard some theme and variations that were without opus 80. So yeah, they're a part of that. They're available. I mean, they're all printed. They're available. He did not want them as part of his catalog.
And do they ever get performed?
Sure. Yeah. At Marlborough. I've done them at Marlborough. Yeah. Because you need that vocal.
We've probably heard them at Marlborough.
I'm sure you have. I'm sure you have. But we'll get past the little ditty and go to Opus 131, which is again a very important work and an enormous work. And it was Beethoven's favorite quartet. And again, with Beethoven's wit, he sent the manuscript to the publisher, and he scribbled on it, stolen and patched together from various bits and pieces. and so Eric Romberger is a musicologist and program annotator. He writes, the alarmed publishers were worried that he might be trying to palm off some old pieces he had lying around. And Beethoven had to explain that his remark was a joke, but it is at once a joke and a profound truth. A joke because this quartet is one of the most carefully unified pieces ever written, and a truth because it is made up of bits and pieces, fugue, theme and variation, scherzo, and sonata form among them. So he was being charming, Beethoven. So what Bromberger is speaking to, and we only listened to the two movements, is that he has this one motive that goes throughout the piece in each of the movements. And we heard the last two movements. And the penultimate movement, the Adagio, is really an introduction to the last movement. It's only 28 bars, the Adagio, and it goes right into the last movement. What do we think of the band performance? Super duper. I could spend more time on it, but now that we've listened to Hammerklavier, it's taken up some time. I wanted to go to Opus 135, which is Beethoven's final work. I can't recall on the show if I spoke of his nephew Carl's suicide attempt. Did that make the show?
No.
So I'm sorry. Yeah. So Beethoven gained custody of his nephew Carl.
Yeah.
And Carl was thrown in the middle of this whole fiasco and brought to court all the time. He would run away back to his mother after Beethoven had gotten custody of him, and would have to be taken back to Beethoven. And you can tell by the stories of Beethoven, he wasn't exactly an easy man to be with. and could be quite overbearing to the young man. And so Carl actually attempted suicide with a pistol, and was unsuccessful. So Beethoven decided, and this was in the show because that's right, I picked it up. Beethoven decided that he would take Carl out of town for essentially just to get him away from the city and relax in the country at Beethoven's brother Johann's estate in Neissendorf. And as I said in the show, Beethoven's brother was quite affluent. He had sold supplies to Napoleon's army as they were invading, and made a fortune. So Beethoven spent the time just after the Opus 131 quartet was finished, and through Opus 135, he completed the piece there. So, and he actually spent time at this estate through December of 1825, and when he returned to Vienna in January, he was already bedridden and would pass away in March of 1826 due to his stomach ailments, which a lot of people can think that he had cirrhosis of the liver, actually, from his drinking. But I wanted to share the score with you, which the famous part, the slow movement of Opus 135. I don't want to just blow through that. It is a beautiful, beautiful little movement, again, of Beethoven in the slow movement. But this motive and comment and attribute to his the motives with muss es sein, es muss sein. He labels the movement der schwer gefasste Entschluss, the difficult resolution, and then he gives the two motives right at the top of the last moment. So I wanted to show you first the manuscript, which is kind of legible, but I'll show you the manuscript of that movement. Here we go.
Woo.
So hold on. There we go. So all of that up top there, that's what he's saying. It's really, I was being a little tongue in cheek. It's not very legible. And down here he quotes the motives of muss es sein, es muss sein. Must it be? Yeah, it must be. So let's get to the actual music, which I think will be a little bit more legible. Here we go. So he labels it der schwer gefasste Anschluss.
The dark.
And then he gives the motives here. In the grave, muss es sein, da, da, di. And then the allegro, es muss sein, ba, bi, ba, ba, bi, ba. So he spells out the quotes and the text that those quotes are attributed to, the motives in the movement. So we can go down here and you see the quotes of the motives here in the viola and cello, and the viola and cello again.
Mm-hmm. Viola cello.
Still in the viola cello, viola cello, viola cello. And then it gets into the allegro and it goes into the upper strings. Here, ba-bi-ba, ba-bi-ba. So it's very inventive that he's using these motives that are these ideas about, some say a philosophical statement about, must it be, it must be. But there's also the story, scholars also believe it arose from a dispute over an unpaid bill. And as a private joke for friends, Beethoven wrote a humorous canon on this dispute, the theme of which he later adapted for the quartet. So, there's those that think that this is this profound question, and then there are other scholars that believe that this is just actually Beethoven being funny, the joke. So it's very, very interesting. What do you think of the Emerson's performance of 135? Good.
Wonderful. Well,
Yeah, that's from about 15 years ago, that performance. Yeah, I thought it was a really terrific performance. But to close the night, I thought, one of the pieces that we've overlooked in this period where he was fairly dormant were the cello sonatas, and the fifth cello sonata. And David can speak to the cello sonatas a little bit better than I can, perhaps. But the cello sonatas are interesting in that he wrote them throughout his life. So you have, these pieces from his early, middle, and late periods. And it's the only idiom other than piano sonata that he did that for. For the most part, yeah, the very early period. I don't want to poo-poo the string quartets, but David, what's the opus number of the first sonata?
I think the first two are opus 5. The third is opus 69, and then these two opus
And
102.
opus 102.
4
Yeah.
and 5.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah, 102. So I wanted to play the first movement of the opus 105, opus 102, number 2, the sonata number 5, and we're featuring a young man who, if you're tuning in on Saturday, he's playing some Bach cello suites. So this is Oliver Herbert and Zhao Hui Yang playing the first movement of Beethoven's Sonata number 5 in D minor. This is a performance at the Curtis Institute. And he also played this piece on the series 2 years ago. Here we go. Oliver Herbert. You like that?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a great piece. We played two pieces from the late period that had these very famous fugues and ignored the fugues. So the three pieces in the late period where there are thorny fugues is the Hammerklavier Sonata, this sonata, and the third one is
130.
The 130, the Grosse Fugue from
Yeah,
Reinhardt.
yeah.
Grosse Fuge, Opus 133. That's right. Those are the three fugues. So yeah, so hopefully I'll give you guys a little inside scoop for Saturday. We'll be online. I'll be posting things on the hour, every hour, some video messages from musicians around the world talking about our series. And if you subscribe to us at YouTube, then you don't have to show up. You'll get a notification that they'll be on there. But at 2 p.m., we're going to be having a Zoom session with Jeremy Dank. And if he shows up. If people who know Jeremy could be a little, yeah. But we'll do a little question and answer with Jeremy Dank, and maybe he'll even play something for us. So that's a little inside scoop for you. And then in the evening, Oliver will be playing the Bach Suites 2, 3, and 4. And we will be visited by two very special guests who will also talk about the series. So hope everybody can join us. And I really appreciate all of those who've supported us. It's all of us in the arts are struggling these days. So it's so meaningful to us. So I really, really do appreciate it. But it's really about the music and what this series not only means to us here in the Capital Region, but what it means to the musicians around the world to play here. It's very important that, there's a reason why we get these musicians, these incredible musicians that come here every year. So I hope you can join us on Saturday, and we'll see you then.
Okay.
Okay? Have a great night, everybody.
Thank you much, Derek.
Stay well.
Thank you very much. We'll see you Saturday, and then next week on Monday as usual.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye,
Take care.
bye, Derek.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Derek. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Oh, Derek,